Monika Bielskyte is a futurist and an expert in immersive experiences and edutainment. And most recently, she has been working with Protopia Futures, which is basically a platform that is a collaborative community researching alternatives to the utopia and dystopia version of what the internet could be. And she's here to give us her vision, her outlook on how we could co-create this metaverse. And in the hopes that anyone who wants to listen will join us here without having parallel conversations in the back. I just keep trying. You're realizing that they're still talking. It's amazing. I'm going to go down to them, and you will have the privilege of listening to Monika Bielskyte.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me your time. I know many of you are tired. Many of you have been confused by so many divergent opinions, but I think that's what's been a great thing, to hear multiplicity of perspectives. So I might be adding some things on this FUD spectrum, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And people have this perception that maybe if we are critical, we are being negative. But I think if we are critical, we are actually being positive because we think that we can do better. And better do we should. So, yes, I'm going to be talking about the metaverse or metaverses at large, but really this is about extending our realities. Right? These boundaries between physical and digital, and in a way, from our indigenous ancestors, the dream world are somewhat becoming more and more blurred, and in some cases even entirely collapsing. So please come on a journey with me. So, one thing that I want to emphasize as much as I can is that there is no such thing as a predetermined singular future. Right? I was introduced as a futurist researcher, a futurist, and whenever people find out what I do, they ask me, so tell me, what future is going to be like? And they ask me from whatever perspective that they're in, be it personal, professional, etc., etc. And they expect a very simple, straightforward answer. But fortunately, actually, not unfortunately, there are no straight, simple answers. If anybody stands on a stage or sits on a stage or does whatever on a stage or in any other position of authority and tells you that this is the only way how things are going to turn out to be, they just might be snakes or a salesman. And by promoting one singular vision of future, they are to benefit from selling you that snake oil of that singular future. So the truth is that even the best futurists, the best foresight practitioners, what we can do is predict a perimeter of future possibilities, within which, based on our current best understanding of science, technology, culture, politics, etc., certain things to us, with all of our biases, seem more likely, less likely, or entirely improbable. But with every new breakthrough, with also every new backtrack, that perimeter of possibility shifts and changes. And so it is indeed shaped by our actions, actions of every single one of us in this room. We think, oh, I'm just doing marketing, or I'm just an artist, or, I'm just a scientist in this very particular niche area. Each of us, with whatever that we do, we are shaping the future that we will be inhabiting. But also, future is shaped by our disengagement, by our apathy. Whenever we think that future is happening somewhere else and is designed by entirely somebody else, and so we disengage, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So by the end of it, I want you to all think, how are you shaping the future? And how maybe you could be shaping it differently. Okay, so very important thing as well is that it is becoming increasingly hard to disentangle techno-utopian promises and socio-political dystopias they bring about and are built upon. There are some wondrous propositions, as Tante in his earlier talk emphasized, how things should be. But if that makes us overlook how things actually are, what is currently this reality on the ground? How this wondrous utopian technology results in Ponzi schemes and all kinds of, scams that further disenfranchises already disenfranchised. And if we're participating in it because we personally benefit from it, we are actively participating in that violence, right? So another important thing is to understand that so much of the techno-utopianism, in fact, is built on a dystopian premise. A perfect example when it comes to the metaverse is Pal Malaki, the founder of Oculus Rift, has been making everybody of his at least early employee group read Ready Player One. And when Ready Player One movie was announced, so many of the VR bros especially have been so excited because finally this is somehow gonna create this sort of mass adoption of VR. But that was a deeply dystopian scenario. Do we want to model the future upon something like that? Ditto for the actual origin of the word metaverse in Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. In some way, that singular metaverse, as depicted in these works of fiction, works and is compelling because everything else, the entire living world and social fabric, has been destroyed. And so the only respite from a horrible, horrible reality becomes this highly reduced digital space. So we really need new kinds of fictions, and we need to look away from these dystopian works when we model the future that we'd like to live in. And so this other huge thing is that if there is this, there is that. There's always a reverse side of everything, right? So most utopias are indeed built on top-down on somebody else's dystopia. Everything, right? This is a fanciful piece of technology. I love it. It's been so useful to me. Yet we know that the rare earth minerals are being mined by child labor in DRC Congo. So the sleekness of it hides the brutality of that. Our beautiful cities, these sort of skyscraper city lines, right? The mirror reflection of them, the mirror reflection of the sort of settler civilization, are the mines and the landfills. So let's not look away. When we aspire to this, what kind of that it could create. So Chinua Achebe says, privilege is one of the great adversaries of the imagination. It spreads a thick layer of adipose tissue over our sensitivity. Whenever we design the future, we should never center the perspectives of those that will primarily benefit from any particular new futuristic thing, be it a gadget or a policy. We, in fact, should center the voices that would be most harmed by it. And not only we should attempt to design for them, but actively engage these people that are at the bleeding edge of harm in the very process of our design. Never design for, always design with. Another huge thing, and I really would like this word to become much more popular, is predatory inclusion. So here, for example, a perfect illustration when we talk about, this fanciful future of the avatars and the metaverse, et cetera, is digital model Shudu, who is a black woman designed by a white man. The benefits of these designs go to the white man that designed her. So does that increase representation? Or is that tokenization by default, right? There's also another term for tokenization that is not exactly that very rosy, right? And how somebody can utilize that image to actually take away the work from actual living, breathing black women. And how can somebody, through that sort of white imagination that fetishizes blackness can actually abuse that kind of image. So these things are happening, and they will be increasingly happening more and more unless we change our narratives. Another thing, right? Digital waste has physical impact too. When we talk about Ethereums and Bitcoins and how that's the answer to everything, I'm not even talking about the fact that the concern has a lot of ethical concerns, which we're going to go into. But simple examples. When China banned Bitcoin mining, the miners moved to Kazakhstan in the middle of winter. Now that collapsed the electric grid of Kazakhstan, which again is mostly powered by dirty, cheap energy. And in the middle of winter, people who actually live in this minus 30-degree temperature ended up without electricity, so that we could buy into fanciful NFTs. And a lot of the ambassadors of that industry also, again, predatory inclusion. When it's people presenting this technology that come from marginalized backgrounds, it becomes much more difficult to keep our critical sense intact. But somebody can be from a particular marginalized group, and what they promote could harm that very group. I mean, we've seen that happen in politics. Tokenization is such a huge thing, and this continues happening. If we want to ban the Global South has done it already. M-Pesa exists. The Western world has been copying Eastern African innovation. But for the sake of our fantasies, my friends' uncles in Zimbabwe are getting scammed of the little money that they cannot afford to lose. So again, we are facing biosphere and climate collapse. Degrowth strategy is absolutely key. We cannot keep adding things when we need to actually be degrowing. And earlier comments today about, well, Netflix also consumes a lot of energy. So what? Should we copy these models? So somebody has been acting horrible. Should I also come and punch you now? Just because somebody else punched you already? So I think we must resist nostalgia and trying to go back to some kind of fictional past. That also is a predicament of privilege. Somebody that is really brilliant and has been a pioneer of VR and the person that founded the so-called first VR company, Jaron Lanier, is very critical of social media, right? And says that we should quit social media, we should quit all these platforms. But that is also privilege, right? Saying that, all of these algorithms, we don't need them, that is also privilege. When somebody belongs to any specific group that they don't have immediate physical community to connect to, actually algorithms can help us find people like us. When we are creatives and we're using AI engines, it can help us to facilitate that creative process. When we live in the kind of cities, and especially if we are of any of the minority genders, we couldn't have taken taxis before. So Uber has helped us. At the same time, we cannot be just complicit and say that, well, because it's done that little good, we should not be pushing it to be much, much better. So we have to also really resist that techno-fetishism and be maybe just a little bit more Luddite. Now, Luddites, there's a big misconception who Luddites have been. There's this notion that Luddites don't understand technology, so just went and broke those weaving machines. But in fact, Luddites were against a particular deployment of this technology to serve the particular people that have already been served the most by society. Right? So to be a Luddite, and even Luddite science fiction, as Cory Doctorow writes, it's about questioning how these things are being deployed and ask and redesign so that they would be deployed better. Right? Okay, so my equation to that is humanitarian evolution plus technological innovation equals livable future. We have to start with ourselves first, right? We cannot expect AI to become this magical thing that will heal all wounds. It will just amplify our existing biases. We cannot expect VR all of a sudden to render us empathetic. It could just alienate us further and push us into smaller groups, right? So we have to start with ourselves first, with our culture, with our policy, with our social reality. And here, I think it's vital to defy escapist fantasies. So something that is at the root of, for example, crypto-libertarianism, because that's what it is. Again, we have to look at the roots of things. How did crypto originate? For monetary transactions in a dark web, Silk Road predominantly, and some other utilities. Human arms, drugs trafficking, child pornography, and other things that conventional banking would not be dealing with. These are the origins, and they don't all sort of magically transform into this inclusive utopia. And now these crypto billionaires want to escape into their private islands or something like that. And then long-termism, something that a peer of mine who's here, Emil P. Torres, writes a lot about, imagines this future of humanity living in computer-simulated matrix. And then other tech billionaires believe that all of us live in a simulation theory. I'd like them to tell that to a refugee fleeing the war zone. I wonder if they would believe that that is a simulation. Bottom line, we are all part of a living ecosystem. In fact, we are a living ecosystem ourselves. All these microbes and bacteria on our skin, with our guts, inside our nose, they are part of us. And I think we realized that during COVID. When we come and talk to each other, we exchange our microorganisms. The reason why a walk in the forest is so healing, to a point where somebody that had surgery recovers better if they're being brought out into nature, is not because we just look at these beautiful trees. It's because we feel the breeze on our skin. It's because we breathe in this bacteria and fungi and all of those living particles of creatures other than human that we live in community with, even within our bodies. Now that cannot just be simulated away. So I think we need to move away from human-centric to life-centric design. We think that to be human-centric is something really good. But if we recognize that we don't live alone in a vacuum, and we don't live just with other humans, we're part of a community of species, we realize that our only long-term survival is if all rest of the life thrives. Right? And so we need to also maybe move away from this idea of brain-centric simulations to fully embodied, sensorially expanded experience. And technology can absolutely help us with that. In fact, instead of trying to escape into these fictional space operas of colonizing Alpha Centauri, we could be doing something that my friends, Marshmallow Laser Feast, have pioneered. Starting to see the world through the eyes of other species and appreciate how different forest looks if we just change our perspective. To start seeing how trees take in the CO2 that we exhale and how they speak to each other through the fungi networks. All of these experiences, everything that I label kind of in that realm of edutainment, not just entertainment, but something that also gives us a new set of knowledge and a new way to experience the world, would invite us back to appreciate and engage with the real world. So I would say that the greatest innovations open new avenues for our perception of the world and our role within it. Heighten our sense of responsibility and reciprocity towards it all. We are not these individuals living apart from each other. And technology should not be forcing us into these smaller silos. In fact, we should only accept and demand technology that would expand, not reduce our potential. Right? And not just intellectually and physically, but also creatively and emotionally. We have to shift our thinking from creating content within the frame of screens and actually explore the space we move through, interact with as our content matrix. What does that mean, right? Screens, they're these tiny little things. They have to compete with everything that's happened in the world around. And trust me, somebody like me who's got ADHD knows how hard that competition is. But when we start stepping into that digital realm, we should not be attempting to just reproduce physical reality, but we should be learning from what is painful, hurtful, violent, harmful in our physical reality and do everything so we don't make more of the same. Another huge thing, right? XR does not exist without interaction. If you're not doing it, if you're not exploring it, if you're not within it, it's not there. So as anybody that attempts to create XR experiences or anything within the realm of the metaverse or the metaverses, it's never about what you design, but what I experience within your design. And now I think this kind of harkens back a lot to a lot of film work, for example, that I've done, and how people are trying to explain all kinds of harmful stereotypes, tropes, scenes within the film world. And they say, well, but that wasn't the intention. The intention was good. But intention, for example, in this case, does not even matter anymore. Nobody cares about your intention. It's about what actually person that steps into the digital realm really feels and what kind of joy or trauma they come out of it with. So the experience is virtual, but the fear is very real. Some of the earliest VR experiences have been sort of these very scary things, either time, space, or action closing down on you. Either you have to step off to some kind of ledger and you're falling down, or some monster's chasing you, or something else that kind of triggers these claustrophobic fears. And the funny thing, complex as our brains are, when we trigger these most base instincts, we forget that this is a fiction. And we forget even to take off the headset. And in fact, it can trigger these deep traumas lodged within our very bodies. So again, I want to argue about these blurring boundaries. We know that even within social media, when we experience extreme harassment within social media, it can absolutely harm our mental health in the physical life. Now, that becomes increasingly so when we are within those digital spaces. This is something super important. XR is a digital space that you step out of with physical memories. Increasingly so for children whose brain is still forming and for people that might have any mental health issues. And I think the deeper we look into our experiences and our parents' traumas, we realize that all of us have different kinds of mental health issues and syndromes and whatever, right? So we have to understand that our memory remembers a lot of these things that are supposedly entertainment, that are supposedly fictions, that are supposedly these digital things as real, and act accordingly. So again, the vital thing, if you want to design for extended reality or commission any project extended reality, is to really think, how do we consciously engage with this real world and learn from it, not attempt to escape from it? This is a shot from Massive Attack show featuring portraits of refugees by a friend of mine, Giles Dooley. We are in this together. We are not apart. We want it or we don't. During this pandemic, Israel was the most vaccinated country, and yet they had severe breakthroughs. Why? Because Palestinian population was not getting vaccinated, right? There's no walls that we can keep ourselves apart from people that we deem less desirable. And so, as we are in this together, we're not in the same boat, unfortunately. We are in the same storm. Some of us have yachts. Some of us barely have life jackets. And so I really want to emphasize this term, Ubuntu. It's an Nguni Bantu term that became more popular, that became popularized during the transition from the apartheid rule to the majority rule in South Africa. I am because we all are. And let that stand as a bulwark against the systems of trustlessness. And let's ask ourselves, are we trying to solve a problem for humanity, with humanity, or are we trying to solve humanity away from itself? I want to read this little poem, Prayer, by Audrey Tang, that I've cited so many times in my work because I think she sums it up so much more beautifully than I ever could. When we see Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And when we hear the singularity is near, let us remember the plurality is here. Same thing with this idea of the metaverse as some one universal thing, a launch pad, escape pad for humanity. It's not. Yet that doesn't mean that XR doesn't have so many interesting and fabulous uses, especially around this realm of edutainment, learning, co-presence, collaboration. It's very important, too, to understand that the more powerful the tool is, the more powerfully can you be used for every purpose. So XR, the metaverse, is indeed the ultimate platform, the ultimate platforms for mind manipulation. And it is the future platform, as Michaela so aptly spoke to in the earlier talk, for mind manipulation, disinformation warfare, and shifting through the digital realm, our very actions in the physical world. And so us looking away from that, us shoving that under the carpet, is not going to change it. And we can manipulate minds for good and for bad. And we need to analyze how that has been done already and change that. Technological panacea is a lie. Technology is never a universal answer. Technology is but an extension of us, of our bodies, of our minds, of our spirits. It's what we do. It's what we bring into it as our values, as our biases, as our misunderstandings. If the problem is social, cultural, or political, the solution also has to be social, cultural, or political. And that doesn't mean we should be using technology in the process of solving these problems, but we should be using it as a tool, not as a universal answer. And I'll finish with this bell hooks quote. To be truly visionary, we have to root our imagination in our concrete reality, while simultaneously imagining possibilities beyond that reality. Right? So let's look straight into the worst kind of things that are happening today. Think how these dystopias could be perpetuated in the future, and make sure that it actually doesn't happen. Not only that that doesn't happen, because no is never not enough, but what is our shared yes vision of the future? What is our shared yes beyond what we already have? Thank you so much.